Alright, so now it is time to graph our data. So again, this is going to be like the two other graphs we've made for the other labs. So after you've collected the data, you should have a completed data table that looks something like this. It should not look exactly like this because this is data that I made up. I pulled data from the top of my head. So this is not your data. So if you submit this lab with this data and I notice, you're not going to be getting credit for it because this is completely made up data. Make sure your group has all of that data. Do not use this data. Alright, so to make the graph, I'm going to want, ideally with a finished product, the graph needs to be below here. So to do that, what I do is I click on this link. It opens it up in Desmos. Alright, and I have my data table that I'm going to copy over here, over there, and then I have, again, my 4 different patterns that we have, and we're going to see which of the patterns fits the data. So to do that, it's pretty simple. I'm going to get the independent variable, the diameter, and the average number of marbles here into this data table here. And I'm going to pause it right now and copy it over so you don't have to watch me do all of that. Right, so my data is copied over here. Now, what I'm going to do is if I notice here, this is 20 is 200. If I look at my scales here, number of marbles is 100 here. I don't want it to be 100. I want it to go to at least 200 because there's data that's plotted but is not being displayed here. So I could do 2 fingers on my touchpad, zoom in and out. But if I didn't want to do that, the other way that I could do it is if I click over here on graph settings, this allows me to set my axes. If you notice, the y-axis goes from negative 10 down here all the way up to 110. But I know that it's 200 is where my data is. So I'm going to change the range here. And in fact, I'll maybe have it go to 220, like that. And then I have it go to 19.25 here. So I know my data is going to be off there because it's at 20. So maybe I'll have it go 25. So that way I have a little bit extra room. My data point should be right there. If for any reason you zoom way too far in or way too far out, this is how you can reset the axes if you can't get it with just scrolling your mouse around. Okay, and you can see, bingo, there is our data point at 200 marbles and 20 diameter, 20 centimeter diameter here. Okay, so we have this. Now the next thing I'm going to do is we're going to see which of the patterns fits by adjusting the A slider. And this A slider, what it's doing is it's changing whatever this value of A is. So right now I have it to A equals 3. So this red line that we see here is marbles equals 3 times the diameter of the circle. So that's what this pattern is showing me here. So if I had a diameter of 10, right now it should be showing me that it's at 30 because 10 times 3 is 30 here. But that clearly isn't fitting my pattern. So let's see if I can get this red line to fit. And there's really nothing I can do to get all the points on it. I can almost get these bottom points here, but it's clearly breaking the pattern here. So we don't have a proportional pattern. We have some other pattern. We can see the green line really isn't going to work here. It's a bit over in the corner there. Really the one that fits is this blue one here. And now I want to try to get it in all the boxes, as close as I can to all the boxes, to the center of all the boxes. Remember, the closer I can get it to the center, the more confident I'm going to be when I make a prediction here. So now I have it set here, goes to the center of some, outsides of some other ones, but overall it's pretty good. And if we keep in mind, here's the plus or minus 1 for our uncertainty with marbles, and this is plus or minus 0.5 in our measurements. Really, we had plus or minus 0.3. You can see if I adjust it to 0.3, it doesn't change the size of the boxes that much. That's 0.3. This is 0.5. Changes them just a little bit, the uncertainty. Really, if you've collected your data nice and accurately, it doesn't really matter if you have 0.5 uncertainty or 0.3 uncertainty. Even with my data that I made up here, it still hits all the boxes, the very edge of that one, even with the uncertainty of 0.3. Alright, so we have this graph. We have our data here. Now I want to get it in. First off, I don't want to see this red line. I don't want to see that green line. So I can either hit the X symbol here, or I can just make them hidden. So now all I see is my trend line, which has this kind of nice upswopey, curvy pattern to it. And we'll get to a name for what we call this pattern in just a second. Alright, the other thing you want to make sure you do, and you want to do this before, is make sure you do hit sign in here. Sign in with Google. And then it should show your name up there. And then when you have all your data, you'd hit save on this, so that if for some reason you lose it, tomorrow when you come back to it, you can load up the data. If you don't sign in and don't hit save, you'll have lost the data and you'll have to start over again. So now I want to get this into my graph. So the first thing I want to make sure is I want to make sure all my data points are here. So I have whatever I see on my screen is going to be the graph that is shown. So I have that. It looks good. I do share graph. I do export image here. Download PNG. And that actually appears off the screen for you. So what you can do is it will appear down here as a box, and there'll be a little checkbox on your Chromebook. I'm working on my Mac book, so that's why it's not showing up. That says copy graph. So you can do that as well. I'm actually curious. Let's see if I do copy image here of this image. I think that should also allow me to get it into the graph. So there's many different ways you can do it, but now it's copied to my clipboard. I do that, paste or Control V, and bingo. I have my graph in here. Number of marbles, diameter of the center. The graph is looking good. Now this is where a lot of people, I've been seeing a lot of people not doing this because I probably haven't been as clear on it. What you want to do is you want to make sure you always have your equation. We've been writing out the equation for the graph. For our proportional lines, it was number of marbles equals whatever our slope is here times the diameter. That was for our proportional. This is our new equation. So I'm going to write this equation out, but I'm not going to use the variables. I'm going to actually write what is m here. This is number of marbles here. And then d is diameter of circle. So the equation that fits my line is this one. So when I write it out on the graph, I'm going to say the marbles equals my a value here, but I'm not going to leave it as a. I'm going to say, oh, I set my a to 0.5. So it's 0.5 here, and we'll get to what the unit should be in just a little bit. 0.5 times diameter of circle, diameter of the circle. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put this in parentheses, because if you notice, diameter of circle squared. So that is the diameter of the circle squared. So I can represent that is with this little up symbol here. 2 is how I can represent that. So that's my equation. I take the diameter of the circle and I square it. So I take the diameter of the circle times the diameter of the circle. Then I multiply it by 0.5. To make it a little bit more clear, I might say it's 0.05 here. 0.05 times diameter of the circle. So anytime we have the equation, anytime we have a graph and a pattern for the graph, we're going to also have the equation here. Alright, so now we have this graph, and it's looking good and in our lab. So if you have a graph that looks like this with your data and the equation here, you are at the right spot. So now make sure you do that, and then check in with your group. The quality control person in your group, make sure everyone has the lab looking like this. Has the data, the equations, the graph, the data, and the front part filled out. So that way everyone in the group's at the same spot. Alright.